Tell me if you've been here. It's the first song of service and your mix is sounding. But then someone comes up to the tech booth and yells,
"Loud noises!"
Okay, maybe it's not quite that dramatic, but we've all gotten a volume complaint or two over the years, right? So what do? How loud is too loud for church? Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, I'm Johnny from Worship Sound Guy, and today we're talking about volume levels in church. If you're interested in mixing tips and honest conversation about mixing in church, make sure you hit those like and subscribe buttons so you can get more content like this. Now, the answer to how loud is too loud for church is, it depends. There's no magical formula that will keep people from complaining about things being too loud, but there are a few things we need to consider about volume when we mix, especially in church. First, let's look at it from a technical level. I'm not always a fan of OSHA, but they do have some guidelines for volume exposure that can be helpful on a technical level. Their regulations state that the permissible exposure limit is a time-weighted average of 90 decibels for up to 8 hours, or an average of 95 decibels for up to 4 hours. So there you have it. As long as your church service isn't more than 4 hours long, you can run 95 dB all day.
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
You get to look that complaining old lady right in the eyes and then slap her with an OSHA manual next time she walks up to the tech booth. Yeah, I've always wanted to smack somebody in church. Whoa. Okay, let's take a step back. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Let's talk about what really matters, your congregation's perception of loudness. You could be running at a reasonable 90, 91 dB, which on a technical level is perfectly safe to listen to for hours straight. But if you try to pull that level with a congregation full of older people who aren't used to it, you'll be kicked out of that tech booth faster than you can make a joke about them turning down their hearing aids. My personal safe level for churches that I mix at, which are contemporary, medium to mega churches playing modern worship music, is from 90 to 95 dB peak, A-weighted, measured from front of house. That's honestly a pretty broad range, and I'll adjust my mix depending on what feels and sounds good in the room and what the congregation is used to at that church. For me and the rooms I mix in, if the parts of the songs that are supposed to sound big are lower than around 90 dB, the mix usually starts to feel flat and lifeless. It loses energy. But if they go higher than 95 dB, you usually start getting complaints from people near the speakers. Now, it's important to note that I'm talking about peak levels here. When you take an average of the level across the duration of worship, it'll be considerably lower than that. One of the great things about most worship music is that it's not loud all the time. So that gives us some freedom to make the loud parts feel full and good and powerful because we know we're going to give our listeners a break once that section is over. But what if we're doing everything right and we're still getting complaints? The answer is still, it depends. If the complaint comes from a pastor or the tech director or producer in charge, I immediately turn the mix down. There's zero room for argument when it comes to requests from them. You might be perfectly within safety levels, but if the pastor says it's too loud, then it's too loud. But what about other times, like when a random congregation member comes back to the board and says I'm running too loud? This is where we as sound engineers have to be very objective. There's definitely a chance that I got caught up in the moment and I may have pushed things louder than they should have been. So the very first thing I do is I look over at Smart and I check my dB levels. If I find that I actually was kind of loud, I'll pull down the mix a little and tell the congregation member, thank you for telling me. That's just the right thing to do, and every once in a while that happens. But if I really, objectively, don't think it's too loud, I'll politely tell the congregation member, hey, thank you so much. I appreciate you telling me. If you'll come stop by the tech booth after service, I'd love to talk with you. That's my line every single time. Feel free to use it. During worship is never the time to have a discussion about volume levels with a random congregation member. They're frustrated, potentially upset, you're trying to mix. It's just not a good situation to have a constructive conversation. If they actually do come back after service, which honestly is exceptionally rare, that's when we can have a brief and hopefully productive conversation. When I'm talking to someone in that situation, I focus on two specific things. First is simply letting them know that I'm aware and concerned about their hearing safety. I'll let them know that I never want to put anyone in danger of hearing damage. And while I'm not going to slap them with an OSHA manual, as much as I might like to, but I will let them know that I've done my research on what healthy exposure limits are and that we're not getting close to an exposure scenario that would be potentially harmful to them. Second, I want to communicate to them that I'm compassionate and understanding that something they experienced was unpleasant. People who come and have a conversation with me are usually very reasonable, and I don't want to simply dismiss their experience during service. I've seen some conversations go something like this. Hey, I'm sorry to bother you, but I just kind of felt like worship was a little bit loud this morning. Is there anything we could do about that?
I tell you what, brother, I mix at the volume that I mix. And if you don't like it, then you can take that decaf soy latte and drive yourself on down to the Methodist church.
That doesn't work. Here's what does. What will work in that situation is an understanding and caring approach that acknowledges the reality that listening to basically a rock band first thing on Sunday morning might not be everyone's favorite thing. If you approach the conversation like that and acknowledge their experience, I promise it will go a lot better. Another extremely critical thing to remember is that when someone says it's too loud, they don't always mean the volume level overall SPL A-weighted measured in front of house is too loud. Sometimes they might mean I heard something harsh or piercing, or there was just some frequency that I didn't like, or I was sitting right in front of the drums and the drums were really loud. There can be so many different reasons why someone might come and say the mix is too loud. It's not always strictly a volume issue. Oftentimes, it's a mix balance issue. If you have too much information in your highs or high mids, that can come across as harsh or shrill or piercing. It could be the tonality of a particular vocalist or a particular instrument in a particular section of the song that came across as too loud, and therefore the congregation member who doesn't know how to describe all that just says, hey, the mix is too loud. I always like to ask when it was too loud. If their answer is something like, oh yeah, it was during the end of the song when the drums were crashing and the vocalist hit that really high note, well, okay, that's a really different understanding of too loud than the entire song or the entire mix or the entire service being too loud. As audio engineers, we're equipped with a lot of descriptive words to explain what we're hearing. The average congregation member just doesn't have that. If they sense something as unpleasant, the only word they might have to describe it is loud. They may come tell you it's too loud when they actually mean something entirely different. That's why a conversation is so important. At the end of the day, though, you are in charge of the mix, and ultimately, it's your responsibility to make sure that people at your church are having a great sounding and safe listening experience. The reality is that the acceptable volume levels will be different in different churches and in different mixing situations, but your job as the mixing engineer is to make the best mix you possibly can within the parameters that you have to work with. Never let volume be an excuse for why you can't get a great sounding mix. Even if you have to mix fairly low, you can still make an exciting, engaging sounding mix that falls within the loudness levels that your church operates at. If you want more advice on how to make a great sounding mix, you're in luck. At Worship Sound Guy, we've put together some incredible online courses and training programs to teach you our techniques and strategies for creating amazing sounding mixes for any church at any volume level. The link is down below to join those courses, or you can go to worshipsoundguy.com for all the details. And you can get a free EQ cheat sheet there as well. But now I want to hear from you. How loud does your church run during worship? Have you gotten a volume complaint? What are some of the techniques you use to create a powerful sounding mix that works within your church's volume limits? Comment down below, and until next time, happy mixing.